The river was louder than it had any right to be. It wasn't just water rushing over rocks. It was the sound of something going wrong. The kind of wrong that makes your heart jump before your mind understands why. And in the middle of that rushing noise, I heard a trembling voice call out, "Please, don't look." That was the moment I realized kindness isn't about grand gestures. Sometimes, it's about taking off your shirt. Before we begin, if stories like this move you and remind you that goodness still exists in the world, please subscribe, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Welcome to Your Channel Name, where we tell real, heartfelt stories that remind us who we are at our best. It happened last summer in Colorado. I was on a solo trip, trying to clear my head after a tough year. Work had been overwhelming. My dad had passed away in the winter. And somewhere along the way, I had become quieter, smaller. I needed space. So I drove out to a state park near Estes Park, parked my truck, and followed a trail that led to a wide, rocky riverbank. The water was clear and fast, snowmelt pouring down from the mountains. Families were scattered along the shore, kids splashing in shallow spots, couples laying out towels, hikers cooling their feet in the current. I chose a quiet stretch a little farther away from the crowd. I sat on a flat rock and let my feet dangle into the icy water. It was cold enough to sting, but in a good way. It made me feel awake. That's when I noticed her. She was maybe 20 or 22, standing knee-deep in the water about 30 yards upstream. She had dark hair pulled into a loose ponytail, and she was laughing at something. A few feet away, a bright yellow backpack and a folded pile of clothes sat on a rock. I didn't think much of it. Then everything changed in seconds. A sudden surge of water rushed around her legs. I later learned they had released water upstream from a dam. It wasn't a flood, but it was enough to shift the current. The rock holding her clothes tipped. The pile slid straight into the water. At first, she didn't notice. Then she turned and saw it. Her face drained of color. She lunged toward the floating fabric, but the current caught it instantly. The shirt, the shorts, everything, gone. Swept downstream in seconds. She stood frozen in the river. The laughter stopped. I looked away immediately, instinctively, giving her privacy. I could hear her breathing hard. The water was mid-thigh now. She crossed her arms over herself and called out, her voice barely steady. My clothes were washed away by the water. You won't look, right? There was something in that question that broke my heart. It wasn't just about modesty. It was about fear. About vulnerability. About being exposed in the worst possible way. I won't look, I said, turning fully around so my back faced her. For a moment, all I heard was the river. Then I realized something else. She was stuck. The rocks were slippery. The current was stronger now. She couldn't just walk out without risking a fall. And even if she did, she had nothing to cover herself with. I pulled off my baseball cap and tossed it aside. Then, without overthinking, I took off my shirt. I kept my back to her. Hey, I called out gently. I'm going to hold my shirt out behind me. You can grab it. Take your time. There was a long pause. Are you sure? She asked, her voice small. Yeah, I said. It's just a shirt. I stretched my arm back, holding the shirt by the collar so it hung down. I heard the sound of water splashing softly as she moved closer. Okay, she whispered. I've got it. I let go. A few seconds passed. Then she said, you can turn around now. I did. She was standing on the bank, wrapped in my oversized flannel shirt. It hung past her thighs. She had buttoned it up as far as it would go. Her hair was wet, strands stuck to her cheeks, and her hands were still shaking. Thank you, she said. And her eyes filled with tears. It's okay, I replied. Are you hurt? She shook her head. Just embarrassed. I gave a small smile. You handled it better than I would have. That made her laugh, just a little. We stood there awkwardly for a moment. I was now shirtless in front of a complete stranger, which felt ironic. But somehow, it didn't matter. My name's Hannah, she said. Daniel, I answered. She explained she was hiking alone before heading back to college in the fall. She had stopped to cool off and hadn't expected the water to rise. She didn't have anyone with her. I didn't know what I was going to do, she admitted. I thought I'd have to hide behind those bushes and wait for dark. The thought made my stomach twist. No one should have to feel that scared, I said quietly. We walked back toward the parking lot together. I stayed a respectful distance ahead, giving her space. A couple of people glanced our way, probably confused about why I was shirtless and she wasn't wearing one that fit. But no one said anything. At the trailhead, she stopped. I don't know how to thank you, she said. You didn't hesitate. You just helped. I shrugged. I hope someone would do the same for my sister. She smiled at that. Then she did something I didn't expect. She reached into the pocket of my flannel shirt and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. It must have been in there from before. She opened it, looked at it for a second, then handed it to me. It's a quote my mom gave me before she passed, she said softly. I keep it with me when I travel. I hesitated. You don't have to give that to me. I want to, she said. Today could have been one of the worst days of my life. Instead, it reminded me that there are still good people in the world. I looked down at the paper. It read, in a world where you can be anything, be kind. My throat tightened. We exchanged numbers, mostly so I could get my shirt back someday. But honestly, I didn't care about the shirt. As she got into her car, she rolled down the window. Daniel, she called out. You didn't just give me a shirt. You gave me dignity. I stood there long after she drove away. The mountains were still. The river kept rushing, like nothing had happened. But something had changed in me. For months, I had been carrying grief like a weight. I felt disconnected from people, unsure of my place in the world. That small act, just turning around, just offering a shirt, reminded me of something my dad used to say. Character, he'd tell me, is what you do when someone else is vulnerable. I had almost forgotten that. A week later, I got a message from Hannah. She had made it back home safely. She told her family about what happened. Her older brother even joked that I was a river hero, which made me laugh. But then she wrote something that stayed with me. I realized that day, she said, that kindness doesn't have to be loud. It can be quiet. It can be a turn back and an outstretched hand. I saved that message. A month later, I received a package in the mail. Inside was my flannel shirt, neatly folded. There was also a new one, similar style, same size. And another note. It said, I'm starting a small project at school called the Kindness Closet. We're collecting clothes and essentials for students who can't afford them. Your shirt inspired it. I sat on my couch holding that letter, and for the first time in a long time, I cried. Not from sadness. From hope. One moment at a river had rippled outward. That's the thing about kindness. You never know how far it will travel. It doesn't require wealth or power. It doesn't demand recognition. Sometimes it's just about paying attention. About choosing to protect someone's dignity when they're at their most exposed. I still think about that day when I hear rushing water. I think about a trembling voice asking, "You won't look, right?" And I think about how easy it was to answer, "I won't." In a world that often feels harsh and divided, we all have moments where someone stands in front of us, scared, embarrassed, vulnerable. We can choose to look away in indifference. Or we can turn our backs in protection. Kindness doesn't always cost much. Sometimes it costs a shirt. Sometimes it costs a few minutes of your time. Sometimes it just costs your pride. But what you get in return, a reminder of your own humanity, is priceless. So the next time life gives you a chance to step up for someone, even in a small way, take it. Because you never know whose worst day you might turn into a story of hope. And maybe, just maybe, that simple act will start a ripple you'll never fully see, but that will carry goodness farther than you ever imagined.